I do want to ask you, since you and I have a lot in common, one of the things that we have a lot in common in today's world for us is that we both love helping emerging founders.
Yes.
And so I think we need to take a little bit of time to talk about that on, you do a lot of executive coaching, individual with founders. I'd love to get your take on what do you think it really takes for an emerging founder to succeed and break through from emerging to get to established, because so many franchisors, they stall out. They stall out in that emerging phase. It's tough. That I call it's like the teen years is really what it is. What have you found in your coaching?
Well, I know that I think you've probably shared this on your podcast, but I think it's like 84% of franchises do not reach that 100 mark.
Right.
And I was looking at the Franchise Times 400 list and looking to see, okay, how many of those have over 100 locations? And, there's some that don't have 100. There's many in there that don't have 100 locations, but system-wide sales, they are showing up on this list because that's the measure that Franchise Times is using.
Sure.
But I think it is difficult. So I think if I were giving my younger self advice, I would say, first off, you are not in the business of children's consignment. You are, or sports programs. You are in the business of franchising, which anytime someone asks me what I do, I'm like, I'm a franchisor of the children's concept Just Between Friends. I'm like, oh, I know Just Between Friends. And then they think I'm a franchisee.
Of course.
And so I would explain it is, no, I am there to make sure to sell franchises, to build the brand equity, to make sure my franchisees are profitable and highly satisfied, and help them with legal, legislative, operations, marketing, all of the things, technology, all of those things. And so if I were to give my younger self advice, I would say you have to really have a focus. And that's part of my story is I held on to my Tulsa location, which was doing well, honestly, which was cash flowing my franchise.
Smart.
I held on to it for a really long time, probably too long. And in that process, lost focus because my local franchise was doing very, very well. Mm-hmm. And so because we're a seasonal business, we have events like in the spring and events in the fall. And so when the event would come around, I would start focusing on the event rather than focusing on my franchisees. And 2009, our goal was to sell 10 franchises a year. In 2009, we sold 30. And in 2010, we almost went bankrupt because we didn't have the capital to support those franchisees. Mm-hmm. And I was also focusing on my sale versus focusing on my franchisees. So, 2011, we reorganized the company. My co-founder took the Tulsa location, mm-hmm. and she took it as her 100% business, and I took the franchise system as my 100% business there. That way I was able to focus on franchising, focusing on growing the locations, growing the people who lead the locations, mm-hmm. and talking to vendors and figuring out, okay, what's not been on my radar because I haven't made time to have vendor conversations and supplier conversations because I wasn't innovating because I didn't have time. So that's one thing. The other thing is to make sure that I know this takes time, but be very strategic about your hires. And I had this super flat organizational structure for way too long. It was me and then everyone else, and everyone reported to me. I was the bottleneck. And mm-hmm. until I figured that out in a really hard way, by the way, I was like, okay, we have to fix this. And I have to replicate myself in others. And so how can I do that? And so over the course of probably 4 or 5 years, we added layers in our organizational structure, and it took a while. One of the most I have 2 things I will say were transformational in our growth. One was adding an advisory board. Back to, you don't know what you don't know, and you're never going to know everything. And so surround yourself with people who have gifts and skills in areas where you don't. JBF has this amazing advisory board now. Mary Thompson, Jay Duke, Josh Wall, John Francis, Ryan Allen. I mean, it's just, and if you don't know who those people are, look them up because you need to know these people. But they're amazing. And then the other thing was we implemented EOS. Those are if I would go back and do things differently, I would do some of those things way earlier.
Which for people like you and I, EOS is really important because as more of the visionary entrepreneur, we're coming up with ideas and having our team figure out how they're going to implement it.
Yep.
And drive them crazy. That's why you had the no person.
Yep. My no person became my implementer. I mean, my integrator.
Your integrator, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. And did a fabulous job.
Do you think by you implementing EOS and really having systems and processes in place, how do you think it impacted your ability then to sell your company? Right? Because what year was that, by the way?
Yeah, we sold in December of 22,
okay.
And I'm going to call it a non-traditional sale because we actually were the case study at the annual leadership conference last year at IFA.
Oh, wow.
And they did a whole case study on how we sold, and they gave the audience like bits and pieces about our story and our history and what would, how do you think this kind of ended up? And most of the people in the room thought we sold to private equity, but I actually sold to my largest multi-unit franchisee, and it has been awesome, but definitely not the traditional way to sell a franchise. I think most people go to market and bring on private equity, or, I know you used an ESOP initially.
Right.
So, and you asked me a question. I already forgot the question. I started thinking about how I made an exit.
My question was, and maybe it really didn't have much of an impact because by selling to your multi-unit franchisee, it was somebody that already had the knowledge of the business. But I was curious because you took time to implement EOS, how that impacted the sale or your ability to sell, because now you had real processes in place, right?
Yep. And, that was one of the things that I felt like was very strategic from I want to sell one day, because that was absolutely going through my mind when we started implementing EOS is brands that are run on EOS, private equity knows, or strategic partners know that if you're running on EOS, you do have those systems and processes figured out. You have accountability built in, you have focus, you have the vision of the founder to, or the CEO to lead the brand. So those things that I think are crucial. We put in a department structure. We did not have a department structure until we went through EOS. So we just had, here's CFO and here's my marketing person, but we weren't really operating we would have a staff meeting with everyone, which was so bad. I look back, I'm like, what was I doing? I just didn't know. But EOS was transformational in the fact that everyone was focused on, one thing, and there was accountability across departments, and you knew that early on, people would say, I'm in a silo. And I'm like, yeah, because you're the recall specialist. We don't really have to talk to you, you know? And but once we started doing this, and the operations department then included the recall specialist, and there was visibility on what everyone was doing. And so you never, and all the way down to the franchisee level, like our franchisees then knew, okay, these are the initiatives that we are working on, and EOS calls it rocks. These are the initiatives that we are working on this quarter. And so the franchisees weren't over there thinking corporate's not doing anything.
Right. They knew exactly what you guys were working on.
Yes. And had some input into our franchise advisory council, would have some input like, okay, these are some issues and would you please work on this? And so those became some of our initiatives.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fumey, or Emerging Franchise Group LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.